This is historian Stephen Ujifusa. Happy 4th of July. 2 weeks ago, we traveled to Wyoming to lay my father's ashes to rest. This is the town that he grew up in, the town of Worland, Wyoming, of about 5,000 people in the north central part of the state. It was a town that had a tremendously special place in his heart. And even though he moved to the East Coast, eventually to New York, and established his career there, he always had a deep sense of belonging in this small town. It was in 1959 that he was the star quarterback for the uh, state championships for his high school, and they won against Douglas. And it was wonderful to go to this small town. And there were a lot of people from his childhood who were still in the area, and they came to a dinner on the Friday before the memorial service to pay tribute. And it was also wonderful to show my children the farm where my father grew up. The outhouse is still there. It's off its foundations, thankfully, but the kids got a kick out of that. But I think it was also a sense of how far our family has come in the past 100+ years since our arrival in this country. And I'm going to read the eulogy that I gave for my father, the remarks I gave at the United Methodist Church in Worland. This was the church that he grew up at. And I've come away with a tremendous feeling of relief and closure. I know that he is where he wants to be. And I've heard numerous people say his story is a great American story, an immigrant story. And I will take comfort and strength from that legacy, especially after visiting this place. We were very lucky to have this sort of sense of place in this town. We still own the family farm. We intend to keep it. It's been in the family since around 1910. And I am lucky that we have this connection, not just to community, but to land. So here is the eulogy that I gave for him on June 20th. Where there is gratitude, there is civilization. Those words were spoken in the 1950s by a wise priest at the Tri-State Denver Buddhist Temple. My dad grew up in Worland, but during his visits to Denver, where my grandmother Mary's family lived, that temple was central to the life of the Okugawa family. It still stands today, cheek by jowl with Coors Field, a lasting anchor, even though much of the surrounding Japanese community was eventually demolished. We visited as a family several years ago, and I am so grateful it is still there. Dad often said he was an immigrant in multiple ways. Although our family had roots in Worland dating back to the 1900s, they still knew what it meant to feel othered. One of Dad's earliest memories was seeing a group of workers from the Hart Mountain internment camp at the family farm. Great-Grandpa Sam had hired them to do farm work. Sam was allowed to drive into that camp, which housed 10,000 incarcerated men, women, and children, and drive back out. He had that unique freedom all because of a daring choice he made decades earlier. Sam had decided to work on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad just to get out of San Francisco, where there was a price on his head for knocking out a Yakuza wise guy who cheated him out of $25. Family legend, perhaps? I don't know. That's what I've heard. Almost all the Japanese Americans who remained in San Francisco ended up behind barbed wire at places like Hart Mountain. Because Sam chose to stay in Worland after the railroad line was finished in 1910, he was one of the very few Japanese Americans who kept his freedom during World War II. Yet he never forgot how close he came to losing everything: his property, his civil rights, his liberty. Neither did his family. From a very young age, Dad learned that from history. He knew he didn't want to be a conditional American. Neither did his mother, Mary, the woman samurai who fought against racism after being denied becoming class valedictorian in La Junta, Colorado. Nor his father, Tom, the 6-foot-tall horseman who dutifully ran the family farm and took care of his parents while dreaming of being a truck driver on the open road. When Dad showed up at Harvard in 1960, he entered a completely foreign world. He had never met a WASP who'd gone to prep school, or a Jewish kid from New York who had attended an elite magnet school. As a high school quarterback, Dad knew how to run with the Swift on the whirling gridiron. Now he had to learn how to run with the Swift on the East Coast. It was not easy. But just as he had learned the value of community back home in Wyoming, he found mentors and friends in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C., who recognized his talent and drive. He found the Harvard Crimson, where he discovered his love of journalism and the written word. And he found an erudite, witty Bostonian named Thomas Boylston Adams, a direct descendant of President John Adams, who hired Dad as his campaign manager for a 1968 congressional race. Tom lost that primary, but he was so impressed by Dad that he helped find him a publisher for a literary venture no one else wanted to back. That book became the Almanac of American Politics. It was the political access granted by the success of the Almanac, combined with Dad's burning desire to right a historic wrong, that ultimately allowed him to pass the landmark legislation granting reparations to the survivors of the wartime camps. He used his position to fight for the people he saw at Heart Mountain all those years ago. When Tom Adams was dying in 1997, Dad drove our family up to Lincoln, Massachusetts, so we could say goodbye to him. Tom's daughter, Ramel, recently told me that her father and Grant shared a deeply similar love of books, history, and the absurd. They just held them in different regional accents. Soon after that, my grandmother, Judy, bought our family tickets to see the musical 1776 on Broadway. When the character of John Adams came out on stage, Dad teared up. He saw in that founding father a scrappy outsider to the world of power politics, trying to convince a fractious team of rivals to move ahead with the grand experiment of American independence rather than put up with British bullying. And oddly enough, 1776 is playing with the Worland Community Theater this 4th of July season. I think Dad saw a version of himself on that stage. He was always in it to win it, no matter what he did. But no matter how high he climbed or how far he traveled from the Worland, Wyoming football field, he never forgot the people who gave him his lucky breaks. The Worland warrior lived his life by that old temple proverb. He chose civilization. He chose gratitude. This is historian Stephen Ujifusa. Happy 4th of July. Thank you for listening.